I'm very happy to welcome Federico Porra from RTD at the European Commission Mission Secretariat to give some welcoming remarks. So Federico, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I think you can hear me. Thank you, Martina.
Yeah, thank you, Federico, for joining us.
Thank you for organizing this and welcome everyone. This is going to be very short on my side. Actually, we organized it at the very last minute with Martina because I really wanted to welcome you on behalf of not only the Secretariat but also on the side of the mission managers, Elina Bardram and Philip Tulkens from the European Commission. Today is an important day on our side because it's the moment where we present to the rest of the community the outputs of the thematic working groups. The thematic working groups, as you will know and you will hear later on, are basically the place where our projects cooperate together and create something new that can benefit the rest of the community. And this is, for lack of a better word, really at the heart of, from our perspective, what mission adaptation is. It's at the heart of what the community of practice is. Really, it's at the added value they want to bring to the regions and the local authorities. So thank you to the projects that have worked very closely to each other and together with the mission implementation platform for the work over the course of the last months and even since last year. So looking forward, even on our side, to hear about the outputs, because certainly it will also be helpful for the Secretariat per se as a feedback indeed to our work. And this will be my first message. The second message is that indeed we look forward to hear about the actual outputs, and I would indeed plea for really focusing on messaging and giving information about the outputs rather than the process per se. Of course, it's important to know that this was part of a very informal, but at the same time structured process of cooperation between the projects. But today, I think our community is also interested in really understanding what's the output out there. And there will be time later on also to understand better how we can make it work for eventually, indeed, what is going to be the next steps for this cooperation of the projects, perhaps after the summers, in light of the good examples and the success, I would say, of this first cycle of the cooperation within projects. So back to you, Martina, and thanks for the work to organizing this event. Thanks to the team of Me4Adapt, to the projects, and also to the regions of local authority that are here to hear about the outputs and the actual added value for their own activities resulting from this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Federico, so much for joining us today and for those opening remarks. So if we can go to the next slide, Jenny. Well, I would like to thank you all now officially for joining us today. And I would like to welcome you to our Enhancing Adaptation Actions Outputs from the Thematic Working Groups event. So in this event, we'll be showcasing the Thematic Working Groups collaborative outputs and some key insights. This includes reports, policy briefs, some practical tools that are resources and insights for regional and local authorities mainly, that will help strengthen connections and synergies across also the wider community of practice. So welcome all. In this event, you'll have also the opportunity to ask questions about these specific outputs that will be put forward. Also share some collective feedback and constructive feedback to enhance these presented outputs and engage with other peers and practitioners working to advance climate adaptation. So before we're going into the presentations, let me quickly walk you through today's agenda. So next slide, Jenny, please. Thank you. So as I said, this is the agenda that we have for today. Following this welcome and opening remarks that Federico delivered and this brief presentation, we'll be diving into a short introduction of the EU Mission Adaptation Thematic Working Groups. This is mainly to frame the upcoming output presentations that you'll hear. And then we'll give you a brief overview of who the thematic working groups are and their progress so far. Right after that, we have with us by Paul Sarnot from Network Nature Plus. They'll be showcasing some relevant outputs related to the nature-based solutions. And after that, each of the thematic working groups will have a 10-minute presentation on their outputs and their relevance and added value for regional and local authorities' adaptation efforts. We will then be opening up for a 15-minute Q&A session where you'll get the chance to ask questions and or share live feedback to the speakers. And finally, we'll be delivering some closing remarks. We will be asking you to answer some very quick poll questions on the specific outputs and the overall conduction of the event. And we'll be closing off today's session. So before we dive into today's first presentation on the introduction of the thematic working groups, let me quickly go through some housekeeping aspects. So Jen, if you can go to the next slide. Thank you so much. So as you can see on the screen, here are the rules, let's call it, of the day. Let me remind you of the most important ones. So as you'll note, the working language of this meeting is obviously English. Today's meeting will be recorded. So, and the recording of this session will be made available later through the online community site. Then please remember, as I mentioned while you were coming in, to keep your mics off, especially the mics, unless you're speaking, as this will ensure that we have a smooth and productive session. And if you'd like to speak, eventually please indicate so with the raise hand button on the bottom of your screen. And just to note that we'll be using Slido for the Q&A session and the polls. I will explain this in the next slide. Jennifer, thank you. Yeah. Very well. Just so that you know, you will be able to scan the QR code that's on the screen, or you'll be able to access Slido by clicking on the link that Yara just shared on the chat. This link is one and the same and will remain the same throughout the presentation, and it will allow you to access the Q&A session and the polls once they are activated. With regards to the Q&A session, this will remain open throughout the whole duration of the event. This means that you don't need to wait until the specific Q&A section of the session to ask the questions, but rather when it comes to your mind, we would encourage you to just pop it on the chat. And then we'll be addressing all of this in the Q&A session later on during today's event. The questions that you'll ask, as well as your answers to the polls, will remain anonymous. So we'll encourage you to share any and all feedback. And worry not, if your question is not picked up due to time constraints during the Q&A session, we will be compiling all of these questions and we will be sending them back to the speakers to answer, and their answers will be incorporated into the summary report that will be produced right after the event. So without further ado, next slide, please. And let's start with today's session. So as I mentioned, just to frame the upcoming presentations and to give you a brief overview of the thematic working groups, let's dive into a quick introduction of their progress so far and who they are. Why are we here, basically? Next slide, Jenny. So again, the question is, what are the mission adaptation thematic working groups? And I think that Federico really put it very well. So the thematic working groups are a space that offer valuable collective space for projects and interested stakeholders to connect around specific adaptation topics. They foster deeper collaboration and coordination, and they enable members of these groups to fit into each other's work and co-develop outputs that then strengthen both individual project delivery in the mission projects and then the mission's overall objective. So as you can see on the screen, there are currently 6 thematic working groups active, which are citizens and stakeholder engagement, climate services, financing climate action, integrating adaptation and mitigation, monitoring and evaluation, and then transformational adaptation. Each of these groups have been working very hard to develop a wide range of exciting outputs, some of which you'll hear about later today. And that's why we're here, aren't we? And then to make the most of this experience, and we know that nature-based solutions are very important as well. So we have some resources made available by Nature Plus in terms of collaboration on nature-based solutions that takes place under the task forces that they coordinate. So this platform brings together local, regional, and international actors to strengthen the impact and scale up nature-based solution efforts. Projects funded by the Mission Adaptation and Horizon Europe Cluster 6 nature-based solution projects are encouraged to participate in the task forces. You'll hear more about this from Biple later on. And as a result, we don't have a separate thematic working group on nature-based solutions, but rather a strong integration into the network nature structure. So the outputs from these task forces are shared within the EU Mission Adaptation Community of Practice, made available through the mission portal, and they contribute to this collective knowledge base that the mission is tasked with building. And well, since nature-based solutions are very relevant for many stakeholders here today, and especially for regional and local authorities in their adaptation efforts, we have invited Network Nature Plus to share some of these outputs and the relevance of the work that they've been carrying out. So you'll be hearing from them in just a couple of minutes. Now, if we move on to the next slide very quickly, this is how basically we got here, just so that you know, as Federico said, it's mainly about focusing on the outputs themselves. But so just that you know, let me take a moment and walk you through the journey of the thematic working groups so far and how we got to today's event. So as I mentioned earlier, the thematic working groups were set to provide a space for deeper collaboration on key adaptation topics that allows mission projects and other interested stakeholders to exchange knowledge and co-develop meaningful outputs that can support both the individual and the collective progress in terms of climate adaptation. So the thematic working groups were launched during the first Synergy workshop in November 2023, following a bottom-up approach where projects identified the thematic areas that were more relevant to their work. And this led to the formation of the 6 thematic working groups that we had today. In January 2024, we had the first thematic dialogue, which is a capacity building session on monitoring and evaluation, a topic that was selected as a key priority by the project. And this also marked the beginning of the thematic working groups actively shaping their working methods and also aligning around shared objectives. Since then, the thematic working groups have continued to meet regularly, develop their purpose statements, agree on ways of working, and identifying specific outputs they wanted to co-develop. At the second Synergy workshop in April 2024, the thematic working group members presented their progress and held more in-depth discussions and conversations to further refine and advance the work that they had been doing. So these workshops reaffirmed the value that the thematic working groups are a space for real coordination and shared ambition in terms of climate adaptation. Over the following months since then, so you can see that quite a big range of time happened, the groups continued working collaboratively and progressing on these outputs and getting them closer to completion. And thanks to this dedication, many of these outputs are completed and will be presented today. And some of them are at a very, very advanced stage and will be also made available shortly. So today's event is the perfect moment to bring this work of the thematic working groups to the wider community of practice, and gives the thematic working groups themselves an opportunity to present these achievements, and allows all of you, part of the community, and especially regional and local authorities, to benefit from these practical tools, the reports or the policy briefs, and any other materials that can support your adaptation efforts. So now, after this first introduction and to frame these upcoming presentations, we're ready to hear first from Network Nature Plus, and then from the thematic working groups to celebrate their progress, share ideas and feedback to the groups, and hopefully inspire one another as we move forward in this shared mission of us in terms of climate adaptation. So thank you very much. Let's move on to the next slide. And I'll hand the floor to Paul Sarnot for this first introduction of Network Nature Plus. Paul, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Martina. Thanks also for the nice introduction about the NBS and the Network Nature. Can we go to the next slide? Yes. So, hi again, I am Vipul Sarnot. I work for Steinbeis Europa Centrum, and we are part of the project Network Nature. So this is a CSA which focuses on helping projects working on NBS to strive further and create awareness, to give more data for the ecosystem to thrive. Can we go to the next slide? Yes. So as you see, Network Nature brings 80 plus EU-funded projects which are working on nature-based solutions. The main task of the task forces is to really cluster the projects together, let them work in different themes or tasks. There are 6 task forces, which we'll see shortly in a graphic. and manage to collaborate together, to help each other, to to yeah, to develop and share more info. If you can go on this next slide, please. Yes, so now this slide would show you around what are the task forces. So we have 6 task forces. You see the first task force is already focusing on NBS data and knowledge sharing. There are 6 clusters which focus on six different topics. There is a task force 3 which focuses on business, governance and financing models. There is a task force which focuses on education. There is a task force focusing on communications, co-governance, co-creation, and another task force which focuses on standardization of NBS and its approaches. Standardization in the sense of NBS assessment, which is quite important because it is necessary to prove how NBS is helping cities, regional governments, and so on with data. So this is how we work. Again, we have 6 task forces which focus on 6 different topics, and we are welcome if there are projects under cluster 6 working on NBS, and if you want to collaborate, be a part of these task forces, we welcome you to join us. I'll shortly send you a more detailed link with the presentation and also how you can be a part of this. As I said, this is quite thriving. We, Steinbeis, are responsible for the task force 3, which is business, government, and financing models. And we already have an active task force, which is of around 150 people now. Shortly, I'll also show what could be our outputs. What do we achieve through these task forces? But if you are an NBS project and are interested in one of these topics and want to collaborate, contribute, you're more than welcome to join. If we can go to the next slide. Exactly. So you see the examples of task forces and its outputs. There are several outputs in form of publications, which have been quite a success in the recent past. I'll put the links for this as well, but just so that you know how we work, these are some of the concrete examples where all these projects have worked together and formulated either a publication or a video or other sorts of policy recommendations, which are then quite helpful. Can we go to the next slide? Apart from the task forces, we have something called as a Network Nature Labs. Under Network Nature, we have a grant of around 112,000 euros, which is given as an operational fund for the task forces. And under this, we fund the Network Nature Labs. So the labs are a 4-step open call. And the idea behind the labs is to really allow projects and individuals to collaborate, to develop new activities, initiatives, tools, standards, guidelines, publication, or materials which can be used within the NBS task forces, and also to promote NBS in EU. If you can go to the next slide. Now here we see a timeline. So that NBS or Network Nature Labs started last year. So there was a call for submission. Right now we are in the process of finalizing and allocating the funding. We have selected 5 Network Nature Labs which have got funding. They have their own projects. Soon we would be going for the open call for. So till now we selected, there was a call, a lot of people applied, and then we had 5 Network Nature Labs. Now, going further, there would be an open call for which would be a call for external contributors. Because these labs have got funding, now they would also like to collaborate outside this ecosystem. And we would like to invite you as well. Once the call is open, please stay tuned to the Network Nature Communications. And if you're interested in one of these labs, if you want to contribute to one of these topics, please feel free to join. and we aim that this should be sometime around midsummer, around June, July, that we go out for the open call for. We'd be happy to receive chances to collaborate or to receive queries. I think that's it about the Network Nature Labs. I believe that's my last slide. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in chat. And as I said, if you're interested to join Network Nature and the Network Nature teams or task forces, I'll put a link in chat through which you get a guide to join us. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Vipul. Jenny, if we can go to the next slide, please. I think here I will hand over to Yara Sheenan, the thematic working groups, overall facilitator and coordinator facilitator. So Yara.
Great. Thanks so much, Martina. So yeah, now we are going to have a presentation from representatives of the different thematic working groups, as Martina mentioned at the start. And this is a really exciting time. The thematic working groups have been working very hard over the past kind of year or year and a half. And so we are happy to see some of the outputs that they've been working on today. So I'm going to hand over, first of all, if we can have the next slide, to Kit England, who is going to be presenting on behalf of the Financing Climate Action Thematic Working Group. Thanks.
Thanks, Yara. And just checking you can hear me all. I hope that's okay.
Yep,
good.
good.
Good. So, hi everyone. Yes, as Yara says, my name's Kit England. I am a senior adaptation specialist at Paul Watkins Associates. We're a little research company focusing on adaptation and kind of decision making and financing in economics. But we've been involved in a couple of the mission projects on financing, notably Pathways to Resilience, but also a little bit supporting Stockholm Environment Institute on Climate Fit. And I'm here on behalf of Climate Fit and the consortium today to kind of showcase some of the work that we've been doing in the thematic working group. So if it's okay, Jenny, just to pop on to the next slide, that would be great. So the objectives of the working group are to create those opportunities to work together and find synergies between the projects, to kind of generate some relevant outputs that can be used for regions and local authorities. So we're looking within the group at public-private collaborations, shared data sort of applied to climate finance, thinking about financing nature-based solutions and engaging with the private sector as well. So yeah, if you wouldn't mind, next slide as well, please, Jenny. So there's a range of different projects that are involved in the thematic working group. So kind of a little slide here that shows you the ones that are there at the moment. We're aware that there were some extra projects that are starting up from last year, and there'll be a kind of further set as well. So it's a growing community anyway. So yeah, if you could move on as well, please, Jenny, to the next slide. That'd be great. So what I'm going to showcase today is one of the outputs from the working group, which is the Climate Fits Finance Database. So as part of the project, the team at the University of Antwerp have developed this database of 244 international examples of kind of innovative case studies in financing climate adaptation. And then we've been working with them as alongside that with Pathways to Resilience and bringing two strands of work together to produce this kind of thematic working group output. So if you wouldn't mind the next slide, please, Jenny. So the database from Climate Fit comes from a particular task that was put in the grant agreement and the description of work, where Climate Fit had to produce a kind of benchmark of 20 international best practices of innovative adaptation funding and financing solutions, or AFFS. And that's on the website. Oh, could we go back a couple of slides, please? Sorry. Oh, no. Next one, please. Sorry. Yeah, that's great. As part of the project, we had to produce this 20 international best practices of innovative adaptation funding and financing solutions. And they're up on the website as a deliverable, and I'd really encourage you to have a look at them because they go into a lot of detail about kind of these 20 approaches that were used. But to develop that, University of Antwerp had to sort of long list a lot of different case studies and then select the 20. So as part of this, they reviewed a wide range of academic articles, sort of review papers, but also grey literature from the e.g. from the European Environment Agency, deliverables from other EU projects and online platforms as well, to get this long list of case studies to start with. So, so yes, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, please, Jenny, that would be great. So in its current form, the database has got this sort of an Excel sheet with 244 international examples. And for each one, we've got a brief description along with some basic information. And then what we've done, or what Thomas Mackels has done from University of Antwerp, and we're now working with him as well with the P2R side, is using some artificial intelligence and piloting a process by which we've derived the financing and funding sources, i.e. who is providing the upfront financing or the funding for the adaptation, and the instruments. And so when we say instruments, we're talking about the mechanisms used to facilitate the transfer of funding. We've used AI to generate that for all of the 244. We've also got an additional 80 examples, but we've got to add those to the database. And then we've still got a range of others as well. So there's a really huge amount of information now that's floating around about different examples of financing and adaptation. And what we're really trying to do in the working group is sort of organize and kind of arrange that in a way that's really useful for potential users, whether that's the regions themselves or whether that is other mission projects. So if the next slide, please. Yeah, that's great. So just to quickly go through each of the different slides, we sort of have an overview of the different cases and the sort of legend in the first sheet. So we've categorized those long list of examples against the mission's key community systems, some climate hazards, also kind of collected some detail on whether the funding and the financing were public or private or hybrid. So funding being the kind of the financing being the upfront financing and the funding being the arrangements to repay the initial upfront financing. And then we also have a little bit about governance as well, and kind of the governance levels of the examples as well. So if we could go to the next slide, please. This is just an example of what it looks like in practice. So you can sort of see we've got all the different projects on the left and the descriptions, and then they've been mapped to the different community systems and the hazards, and then some examples of the funding and financing. We also have added the location of where they are and kind of when they started, as well as a link to each of them and the primary financing model as well. So really helpful because you can start to dig down and look at, well, am I interested in a particular key community system? Am I interested in models that have addressed particular hazards, etc.? So really useful. And we sort of know that there won't be a simple option to just take those models and apply them in different regions, but they're starting points for looking at what others have done as well. So could we have the next slide, please? And then the next couple of slides really just dig into the kind of AI process we've used. So this, for example, shows you each of the case studies and against the different sources of finance. So as part of Pathways to Resilience, what we did is we developed a standard taxonomy of different sources and instruments for financing, which has since been used by UNEP in the Adaptation Gap Report, which is really lovely. So we have all, for each case study, you're able to dig into, are they funded by sort of, say, for example, European institutions, national level public entities, regional or subnational government entities, etc., etc. And you can look through and again, look for examples of what are different institutions financing, which is really interesting. And if we could go to the next slide, please. So this is the same for the instruments as well. So again, you can look at whether it's grants or debt or loan or bonds, etc., as well. And again, if we could go to the next slide, please, Jenny. And then what we've done is we've, for each of the case studies, you can then have a look at the financing sources and the funding sources as well, and the instruments. And this gives you a little bit more detail. So whilst the Pathways to Resilience taxonomy is very generic, so say, for example, development banks is a category in there. This dives into a little bit more detail and tell you, well, which development bank or which which business has kind of funded this particular case study, etc. So yeah, so it's quite handy to then dig down right into the detail if you're interested. So if you wouldn't mind the next slide, please. So just very briefly, how do we get the information from AI? So I think it's really important to say that this is a very early stage technology, and so we're experimenting, and we would welcome when the database goes live, we would welcome feedback from people. If there are inaccuracies, we would love to improve it. But what we did is we used ChatGPT and Copilot together, and we provided them with a taxonomy of sources and instruments. And we distinguish between sources and instruments, but also financing and funding. And then we gave the AI the cases from the Climate Fit database. So we gave them the name, the description, and a URL. And then we asked the AI to gather the information for each case. So we then manually checked those for the first 20 from Climate Fit as well to validate it before we went further. So that's a kind of a very quick overview of that process, and we found it to be pretty accurate. There are obviously going to be a few things that we need to tweak, but actually in the round we think it's reliable enough to release to the public. So if you wouldn't mind the next slide, please, Jenny. So yeah, so here we go. So this is just a little bit about how we validated the information. So I'm going to skip over that for now. So if you wouldn't mind the next slide, please, Jenny. So we have a few next steps to do. So we really just now need to pull all of the information together and get it in a format that's ready to present to wider users. So that includes things like a README, the methodology. We're also going to bring together with the case studies that were in the Pathways to Resilience catalogue, and I will just put the link in the chat afterwards for the Pathways to Resilience catalogue as well. We'd encourage you to have a little look there. So the idea will be there will be one overall case study database from the two projects, which also has the sources and instruments and things in it, which will be really useful. I think just a couple of reflections from us is that this was a really valuable process, and we think it will have lots of use for stakeholders, but we really didn't have any time or budget allocated to work on it. And I think there is it's quite helpful now that the mission calls are starting to foresee collaboration with other projects. But I think there's just a bit of a tension there between doing that and having formal deliverables in a grant agreement that you have to deliver on. So it has been quite challenging to try and bring this to fruition because we're sort of doing it around the edges of the core things that we have to deliver in each project. So that was just a little reflection. And I think we also see we don't have the resources in either project just to turn it into an online interactive tool. And we think that would be a really valuable thing to do. So we're going to look for opportunities to how to do that. But for now, it will be in that Excel form. So I think that is everything from me. And I am sorry for whizzing through that, but just to keep to time. And I'll hand back to you, Yara, and happy to take questions sort of after the meeting and things. So that'd be great.
Thanks very much, Kit. That was really comprehensive, even though it was quick. I think there's so much there that's of use, and exciting to see whether you find opportunities to collaborate further and bring this to an online format that you think will be more user friendly. That would be really great. We will share at the end of the meeting as well. These outputs will be available on Futurium as and when they're kind of ready to be published, and there'll be information on them there. So please do keep an eye on that. So yeah, any questions for Kit, you can put them in the Slido. Martina's put the link in the chat again, and we'll either get to them at the end or forward them to him and the rest of the thematic working group to answer. So great, thanks so much, Kit. So we'll now go on to the next thematic working group, which is citizen and stakeholder engagement. We have two of the thematic working group champions, Oscar Bernardez and Rosie Witten, presenting, as well as a couple of other colleagues from the thematic working group. It's been a collaborative process. And they'll be presenting the briefing note that they've been working on. So go ahead, Oscar, if you want to start. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Yara. Good morning, everyone. Just let me know if you don't hear me. So first of all, I'll introduce myself very quickly. I'm Oscar Bernardez from TWGA, which is Legalese and Enterprise University Foundation. And on behalf of the thematic working group on citizen and stakeholder engagement, I'll make a quick introduction also into what we've been working on for the past year. So as you can see in the next slide, I think it's important to remark that we are several projects that are currently active. This is not representative of the dozens of projects that have contributed to this group. And next slide, please. We began working already back in September 23 when we identified 13 out of 80 projects that could work in the citizen stakeholder engagement group. But it's important to know that we are covering two different groups and need separate and specific frameworks. And this is really important because in the end, different projects are leaning towards one of them. And so it's sometimes difficult to concentrate efforts and to come up with a single methodology that covers both of them. So what we tried to do was to avoid duplicities, to consolidate all the platforms we had currently available, and most of all, avoid fatigue among stakeholders and citizens that sometimes look at this bunch or a myriad of projects that are out there, and it can be difficult. And especially when looking at the regional and local authorities, we wanted to provide us one single shop with the tools and methods we were using in the form of lessons learned. And I think this is a common theme with other thematic groups, in that we are emphasizing how important it is to be able to follow on our steps, to be able to replicate what we did, instead of trying to have a single methodology trying to encompass everything that we have done. And in terms of what we have produced, we already produced in April 24 a flyer for other EU projects to follow up and to contribute to our thematic group. And we then produced a second output, which is a briefing note we are going to be presenting today, which is called Improving Collaboration and Experience Sharing of Citizen and Stakeholder Engagement Approaches for Climate Adaptation. It sounds like a lot, but it's quite easy to find and to follow. But more on this by Rosie Witten from Stockholm Berman Institute. If you are there, Rosie, you can go ahead and present the note.
Perfect. Thanks for the introduction, Oscar. Can we have the next slide, please? So I'm presenting the first part of the briefing note, which, as Oscar mentioned, is focusing on citizen and stakeholder engagement, but I'm particularly focusing on the climate adaptation platform side of things and how we look to how we conduct citizen and stakeholder engagement. So the first part of this briefing note focuses on something called the Agora Community Hub, which is a platform that's been created as part of the Adaptation Agora project, which aims to support citizens in developing and discussing climate adaptation solutions, as well as decision making and action in their local areas. The Agora Community Hub is a platform that was created to be a meeting point to empower local communities to share their needs, their knowledge, their experiences, and any questions on climate adaptation issues and solutions. Can I have the next slide, please? So in addition to going through the Agora Community Hub as part of our briefing note, we also wanted to spend time acknowledging other climate adaptation platforms, because there are quite a few out there and they can be quite siloed. So we spent some time acknowledging and identifying these climate adaptation platforms. And in particular, we have focused on We Adapt, Climate Adapt, and Enrich Global as part of the briefing note, noting and summarizing what these climate adaptation platforms aim to do and the work that they conduct. Next slide, please. Thank you. And then, so as I mentioned, we have all of these different climate adaptation platforms online. And as Oscar mentioned, we really would like to build upon the information that's already available, instead of repeating and creating the same information again in different locations. So as part of the Adaptation Agora project, which is then fed into this briefing note, and to support breaking down silos and help building engagement and learning between different climate adaptation platforms, we have started this Climate Adaptation Platforms Network. This built on work previously done under the K4CAP project, and has brought together, I think, approximately 30 different climate adaptation platforms, attending a few different webinars. We've had 3 so far, with a 4th one upcoming. And these have been where we've had open spaces to discuss and focus on potential issues or challenges that climate adaptation platforms have when trying to engage with citizens and stakeholders. In particular, we've been trying to focus on connecting knowledge to policy and practice, discussing how to monitor the impact of climate adaptation platforms, and also kind of raising awareness of what platforms and information is already out there. So I think that would be it for part one. So I think, Oscar, I'll hand it back over to you, but we'll make sure to share the links to this in the chat as well for anyone who's interested.
Thank you, Rosie. We will now have a brief introduction on Nature Demo project. Our colleague Mohamed El Dessouky from Digital Innovation Center is going to present very briefly their contribution to this note.
Thank you so much, Oscar, and welcome everyone. I'm Mohamed El Dessouky. I'm coordinating the Nature Demo project, which is emphasizing the mainstreaming of nature-based solutions for more resilient, climatic resilient infrastructure. So the project is very wide, and please take a screenshot of this where you have the QR code of the project where you can reach us. Basically, we are a group of 23 partners across Europe, emphasizing the implementation of nature-based solutions. And basically, we are dealing with regional authorities and local authorities who are having like the traditional infrastructure practices, because of course it's easier for everyone to see the immediate benefits of such things. So there is a knowledge gap between the different benefits that nature-based solutions can bring, as well as the perceived economic uncertainties. Of course, when you do some natural activities, usually it takes time, and with time you get more risk, and people do not like such cost and uncertainties and so on. So in our project, we are trying to co-design and collaborate basically with all stakeholders, local stakeholders, and exchange with them the implementation of such nature-based solutions for more climatic resilient infrastructure in their regions. And the project champion 5 demonstrators in 5 countries: Austria, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, and North Macedonia. And with this, we are trying to showcase the benefits and the co-benefits of nature-based solutions for the climatic resilient infrastructure. With this, thank you, and moving forward to the next speaker, who is representing the other use case. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm going to be going over the Adaptation Agora project. Like Rosie said, our project focuses on developing and leveraging mechanisms to engage communities and regions in climate adaptation. So some of the challenges we identified with integrating stakeholders in the decision-making process includes a lack of interaction and communication between the different target audiences. We also saw some knowledge gaps among stakeholders on climate risks. We found there was difficulty aligning multi-sectoral interests, and we also found some economic barriers and cost uncertainties. So to overcome these challenges, we implemented some co-design processes with local communities. We utilized knowledge exchange and capacity building activities. We integrated sector-specific experts, and we also created living laboratories within each of our project pilot regions, including Spain, Italy, Sweden, and Germany. This gave the regional and local authorities some added value in the form of developed cost-effective citizen engagement methods. We increased their communication channels, and we also displayed transparency within planning and designing processes that helped build trust with citizens. So thank you very much. I think now we're moving on to the Transform Our project, and I will also drop some info on Adaptation Agora in case you want to learn more about our efforts. Thank you again.
Thank you, Madeline. So moving on into Transform Our, back again to me. Let me know, Yara, if you are good in time-wise. What we have developed for the briefing note is a basic governance scheme, which is based on our experience in working throughout these 4 years in Project Transform and how to work across community systems. You have to understand that Transform being one of the first projects to implement a multilateral approach outside the agri-food innovation ecosystem. This was quite a challenge from the start, because we had to basically test by doing, And it was also important that we kept a vision among the project partners and among the demonstrators so that we can work with 21 key community systems while be able to measuring their progress. And it was really important for us to be able to develop several tools, beginning by the playbook for additional pathways co-creation. This is an expression of the methodologies we created beforehand, and what ensures is that you are able to work alongside stakeholders throughout the project, following a certain procedures and working in a level playing field, so to ensure that the solutions you create are viable. But it is also important that you are able to follow up on these tools with a certain practices that come from project structure. Basically, what we did was working as a broker so as to build some capacity and to be able to follow up on the different needs of the demonstrators by investing time, mapping the stakeholders, trying to harmonize the development, and also sharing resources between them and planning for theme activities that will ease the pressure both on the technical facilitators for these events and the stakeholders taking part of them. And lately, we have been exploring the use of scenarios to create a common agenda in order to overcome one of the barriers we have found is that it is very difficult to work beyond the 4-year timeline of the project. So I think it's really important that we continue this line of research. And so for a point of view of the playbook, I will be sharing with you on the chat a digital version of our Transform playbook. And next slide, please. And just as a summary, really quickly, some key messages from our working group. We try to summarize what we feel it is really important for you, either if you are an ongoing project or a project that just started, or a regional or local authority trying to create an innovation ecosystem for citizens or stakeholders, that you require separate approaches for these two groups. That you try and go out and find these methodologies that already exist so that you can specialize and focus on providing a decision-making support for them. That we shouldn't get rid of older demonstrators that even if they weren't applying these tools and methods we were talking about, they are full of very valuable experiences. And this is also linked to what the stakeholders and citizens have been working on for years, that tacit knowledge that we shouldn't discard while trying to avoid extractivism. So this idea that you simply come to a certain place, you get information you need and simply disappear. And that these conditions we need to meet in order to work alongside them have to be met throughout the project and even beyond the project timeline. And we have to remain flexible by doing so, because in order to create a balanced ecosystem, in order to create viable solutions, the governance schemes we put into place shouldn't be artificial to the ones that are actually going to be upkeeping the solutions. And if you are able to keep all these agents engaged by involving them in decision making, by agreeing on the frequency of the meetings, on what channels you're going to use, and with regular activities, that will also increase the chance of success. And that's everything on my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to everybody from the thematic working group for contributing. Interesting to see, I don't know if the Network Nature team is still here, but living labs were mentioned quite a lot in all of these presentations. And then Oscar mentioned the importance of keeping these kind of demonstration sites going into the future. So really interesting. Thank you so much. We will now have the next thematic working group presented by Tommaso Bassetti, who is a facilitator for integrating mitigation and adaptation.
Thanks, Yara, and yeah, great to meet everyone and to have this chance to present as a facilitator. My name is Tommaso Bassetti. I'm a senior specialist at iCatalyst, a small consultancy based in Madrid. And yeah, we can go forward with the next slide. Perfect. So this thematic working group, we've been very excited to get a chance to work on the integration of mitigation and adaptation obviously key challenges and needs. Quite early on in the process, the decision was to focus on a position paper. So a rather short and targeted output for this one, focusing on the gaps and opportunities for actually better integrating mitigation and adaptation. This, as you'll see in the next slides, is going to be focused mostly on the EU missions. Not to focus too much on the process, as was stressed by Federico, but this was really a collaborative authorship process. I think the interesting part is that really a variety of stakeholders participated, from cities to national platforms, from both cities and adaptation, but also academic institutions, NGOs, consultancies. And this really, I think, has brought a lot of different perspective and approaches, which has been very valuable in shaping this output. And you can see here some of the projects that have participated as such. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is obviously quite visible to all of us, but cities and regions face this dual challenge of both reducing greenhouse gases emissions and also adapting to the impacts of climate change. While it may seem that there are clear interconnections between these two approaches, what we've discussed through the workshops and through the exchanges during the thematic working groups is actually policy frameworks, funding structures, governance mechanisms. So all these key processes often treat them as rather separate and even sometimes competing priorities, which can generate rather big challenges. So at the heart of this thematic working group is the idea that by fostering synergies and more integrated action between the cities and adaptation mission, we can advance mitigation efforts and adaptation efforts that are more integrated and can build on each other. Next slide, please. So the idea of putting together a position paper is also, I think, quite important. It's been discussed that there was a limited availability of research and literature on how to effectively bridge these two efforts. So acknowledging this gap, there was an early commitment to really make this thematic working group a hub for knowledge aggregation and dissemination, which I think has been really valuable for all the parties involved. Again, I think this we don't have to focus too much, but there has been several workshops happening between 2024, 2025, some of them virtual, some of them in person. Next slide, please. Okay, so just a key point on the added value and the key audience. It's really about adding some valuable knowledge for better integrating mitigation and adaptation. And the key audience for this, given the context we're in, are the adaptation and cities missions stakeholder ecosystems, notably regions, cities, relevant national government agencies, relevant EU level policymakers and private sector stakeholders. But obviously this can be relevant for all practitioners and academics working on these two. Next slide, please. Okay, so we get into the content now. In terms of what really the content has been about, has been on trying to brainstorm and understand how mitigation and adaptation actually can interact between the two. And the key starting point of this discussion has been acknowledging that mitigation and adaptation are not always distinct, isolated process, but are rather synergistic and can be linked at multiple scales. And doing so can result in several co-benefits. And as I stressed before, the position paper that is presented here and that will be uploaded in the platforms focuses on these interactions, departing from an adaptation point of view. Next slide, please. All right, so presenting just here two example cases of interactions between adaptation and mitigation, which can show us how we might achieve positive interaction between the two from coordinated action, or a negative interaction from uncoordinated action. So let's take, for example, a mangrove restoration project against coastal flooding, which obviously may produce an adaptation benefit to communities, but unlike standalone seawalls, it also may act as a carbon sink, which also support mitigation efforts as well. If we take the same example, where action is not coordinated, the construction of the same seawalls, even if they may be effective in the short term, might provide a false sense of security and incentivize construction activities that generate emissions, which definitely have a negative impact on mitigation, also in areas that could have otherwise been covered in nature-based solutions, which would then have a positive impact also on mitigation. So the key here that we've really discussed is we really need to be thinking about how these two can interact, both in a positive and a negative way. And that should be really at the heart of localized decision making. Next slide, please. So in terms of key messages, two quite simple ones. Without strategic coordination, adaptation and mitigation efforts risk, one, missing valuable opportunities for unlocking longer-term adaptation solutions, and also unlocking mitigation co-benefits. And also, and very importantly, promoting maladaptation, which ultimately exacerbates vulnerabilities and undermines long-term climate resilience. Next slide for more key messages. So there has been obviously a lot of agreement between all the thematic working group members that the cities and adaptation missions have definitely been an innovative step forward. So this is really great from regional and local governments' perspective, especially. However, these missions, and this is the feedback we've received, are sometimes presented to them too much as really separate initiatives with clearly distinct ecosystems, governance, funding structures, and processes. This, especially from local government's perspective, local and regional government's perspective, makes it really time-consuming and resource-intensive to develop integrated climate strategies that really integrate the two of them. Some local governments have, by their own means, collaborating with their respective regional or local government, started to do so. But these are quite isolated examples of really proactive local and regional governments. So the feedback that has been produced is that to maximize impact in integrating mitigation and adaptation, the cities and adaptation missions could be more closely aligned. For instance, and there have been some examples already been put out, through cross-mission calls, fostering an integrated approach that allows local and regional governments to understand the potential of combining mitigation and adaptation efforts and foster collaboration on climate issues across government levels. Next slide, please. All right, and therefore to conclude on this one, some things that might really help in further integrating mitigation and adaptation at the EU level, coming from this position paper, is obviously long-term programs integrating mitigation and adaptation that would allow this to remain a priority beyond political cycles of 4 to 5 years. Obviously also dedicated funding programs and financial mechanisms that foster cross-sectoral collaboration. One example here that has been stressed is the City Climate Capital Hub that really offers a valuable chance to align mitigation and adaptation into a program that is dedicated to supporting projects as a facility and for finance. And also this very much from the local and regional government perspective as well, training initiatives to equip these policymakers with the expertise needed Again, because adaptation and mitigation continue to not necessarily be seen as areas where linkages can be exploited. So obviously, much more to come on the position paper with much more depth. But this is just an initial output presentation we wanted to provide. So that will be it from my side. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I'll be still connected.
Thank you so much, Tomasz. So that was really interesting and very clear examples, as you mentioned, about how to actually integrate in practice. So do look out for the final policy paper, which will be on Futurium, and Martina will talk a bit about that at the end, where you can find the links and when the outputs will all be available. So yeah, really great to see. Thanks so much, Tommaso, and to the Thematic Working Group for all the work too. So we now have Jan Cools, who will be presenting on behalf of the Transformational Adaptation Thematic Working Group. So Jan, please go ahead. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So I'm representing both the Thematic Working Group and the Transformer project. So, and the University of Antwerp. I heard them passing by from Climate Fit already, and Oscar presented earlier. Right, next slide. Yeah, so the main output of the transformational adaptation thematic working group has been like the policy brief. It has been like out since a few months. And basically the transformational adaptation is like a concept that is brought up in the adaptation mission, and basically they want to speed up adaptation work. But then the concept, like what is transformational, that was a bit like puzzling. Like, is this just accelerating? Is this also doing like other work? Is this like upscaling and what? And many of the Horizon project basically have that as a deliverable in their work, like doing something transformational. But we realized that was not always very clear what the transformational was. So we came up with the policy brief, and then we developed it further into a scorecard that is like a self-assessment tool that you can fill out and basically score your project and see where the strong points and the weak points are in terms of transformational. Yeah, next one. So, as in the others, we have a bunch of Horizon projects involved. We took the lead from Transformer, like B2R, Climate Fit, and so these are all like mentioned earlier. Of course, the others are also like important. So then we developed like the policy brief, and then also like others joined the group. So the projects that are mentioned here were those that helped in authoring the policy brief. Yeah. So they're not all projects that are currently in the group. Next slide. So that has been a bit explained already, like transformational. It's of course the idea is that transformational opposes like incremental, like a lot of adaptation work is starting up in many regions, and some of course more advanced than others. But like incremental change, you may run into like small changes, you may run in lock-ins, you may not basically achieve resilience by 2030. So this working group basically, well, in the policy brief, well, they made that shared understanding, but we also provided like examples, like what is examples on transformational adaptation. And some of them, of course, are a bit like older and not entirely related to climate adaptation, but it gives like an idea on how a societal change process can shape up. Yes, next one. So this scheme we developed in the policy brief on what is transformational adaptation. So it of course is also like a lot of buzzwords in a way, but it boils down to addressing the root causes of vulnerability. And then of course that depends on floods and droughts and heat waves and what. but so it moves beyond current practices. So promoting path shifting, promoting inclusivity, and options to achieve transformational adaptation or basically nature-based solutions like governance, innovation, and behavioral shifts. So in the figure, you see like the top line is incremental adaptation. So everyone's resilience or adaptation improves, but not everyone improves as much, and also some are left behind. So that's where we said like transformational is like a systemic improval of the resilience, right? So you have to read more in the paper if you want to, in the policy brief, if you want to find out more. Yes, next one. So why this is like interesting, like the added value of this working group. I also made like a video for the mission forum in Wrocław, like next week or tomorrow. Tomorrow, is it tomorrow? Anyhow, soon. So there's also like an illustration of this of the added value. So before there wasn't really like a cohesive view of what transformational was, even though it was mentioned in several calls and several policy documents. So we clarified the concept. We made also like that tool. We try to bridge to write it for a real world, let's say, adaptation, decision making or planners. And here, so the examples. Well, I was trying to talk before on the examples, but then I realized there was like a slide here. So what is basically transformational adaptation? So three examples here are brought up. Like in Germany, the Ruhr area, that was like a former coal mining area, and then they stopped the coal mining, and then of course there have been like 20-30 years, I guess more than 30 years. They did like a restoration or a conversion of the area, and of course the driver for the conversion was economic. That like the coal mining stopped. But meanwhile, and so there was no driver related to climate at all. Also, that time in that period, that was not really an issue. But if you see now this area in the Ruhr, then there are several of the aspects that we now consider to be climate adaptation that would fit. Like there is like a reconversion. It's like a much greener area. Some parts are also like inclusive, so an entire conversion and transformational indeed. So and then there are like two that are driven basically by climate. So the room for the river is basically the key example. What is transformational? Because there was like the threat for flood risk. And basically they said, well, we cannot be continuing to extend our dikes. So the incremental work would be increasing the dikes or put more dikes or heightening the dikes. Or so they said, well, we will not be doing that. We will have like an integrated approach. We move the dikes outward. We let some areas flood. Some people will have like some disadvantages. We need to compensate well, the farmers or houses that are in area endangered areas. So it required also cooperating together with several authorities, also with farmers, also with citizens. So it's both like spatial planning, transformation, how to work with citizens, transformation. It is like a new approach and how to address floods. And that is still now considered innovative in many countries in Europe. So and the third one is a small example because some of the streets where citizens take their own initiative and they want to make their streets like greener. So that's also like a transformation because like even though at small scale, but that also fits according to our scorecard. Because it let citizens decide is also like a cooperation model, and then it also drastically shows changes the look of streets. Yes, so those are like three examples. We can go to the next slide. So we have like a tool that is basically available for you. You could even open it, I get on a scorecard for transformational adaptation. So it takes like 10 minutes or so to fill it out, and then you get like a score on where you're scoring well and where you're scoring poor. There are some more tools that came out, well, that have been brought up or coming up or discussed in the working group. There's that tool on maladaptation from Resilience. So in Transformer, we also developed a playbook on transformational adaptation. And then when we were developing that scorecard, we realized that also in other projects, they have done similar issue, all a similar scoring assessment. So that is also like would have never been brought together without the working group, I guess. So here is like Pathways to Resilience, Regions for Climate. I guess you recognize the project meanwhile. So that's also like a benefit of the group that we got to know all the other tools, and the developers realized there were also others, because that is of course an issue. Like these the developers of these tools often were not aware of the other ones, if they were not in the working group, let's say.
Dan, can I just ask you if you could wrap up in 1 minute,
Yeah.
just so we have time for Q&A? Thank you.
All right. So I guess that's more or less it. The next slide, and then yeah, so that can also be skipped, and then we have like one non-ski messages, I guess. Yes, so transformational adaptation is of course like urgent and necessary if we see like how many hazards and disasters, natural disasters come up. So we made the policy brief and the scorecard, you can use that. Yeah, and that's basically it. So I guess, yeah, all right. So I'm still on time, suddenly.
Thank you very much, Jan. Yes, great to see the key take-home messages as well, very clearly set out. And we will be, if you want to add the links to the tools that you mentioned as well in your previous slide to the chat, so that people can access them, because I think they sound really useful. So all the speakers, feel free to add, links that you've mentioned to the Zoom chat so people can access them as well there and follow up. So thank you so much, Jan. And we now have our last thematic working group presented by Jonathan Cauchi, who's a facilitator, and this is about monitoring and evaluation. Thank you, Jonathan.
Yara, good morning, everyone. As Yara presented me well, I'm Jonathan. I'm basically one of the co-facilitators of the Monitoring and Evaluation Thematic Working Group, and I'll be taking you through the outputs of the groups. I'll try to be brief as much as possible to have enough time for the Q&A. Next slide, please. Thank you. So as you can see, we have quite a number of groups participating in this thematic working group, some of which have been with us from the very beginning, but we also have had quite a number of others joining us as we went along, and the last few months we've been having new additions. Next slide, please. So thank you. In total, yes, this group produced 2 outputs, one of which, let's say, is more official than the other. And the more official one is output 1, which is the insights document. And basically, it concerns the monitoring challenges and lessons learned. And basically, the aim of this is to support future adaptation monitoring initiatives. And also, it provides practical lessons and frameworks for the mission community. The second output is a bit more informal, and we can say it's like a roundtable summary document that we have done in the group, and consists of monitoring, evaluation, learning of climate adaptation projects. And basically, we have discussed the feasibility of a standard framework, the shared challenges, and common approaches we can take as a group. If we move on to the next slide, please. So thank you. More specifically on output 1, the insights document, which we, let's say, call the official document, we present the work of the mechanisms for monitoring climate resilience and adaptation, and we take the work from 3 Horizon 2020 projects, Arsinoa, Impetus, and Transformer, and we also consider the work done by a newcomer project called Natalie. Basically, also the resilience, let's say, project has done also some work, which was published in the Open Research Platform. And also we have inspired ourselves also from the lessons learned and challenges presented in that paper. We can move on, please. Thank you. So as an added value to regional and local authorities, this output presents the lessons learned to support future adaptation monitoring initiatives, and we also present practical recommendations and frameworks for the MIP community of practice. Among the, let's say, the biggest challenges and solutions that we identified is challenges with tailoring global frameworks to fit the local needs of the projects. Also issues with identifying data and basically also to access the regional data that is relevant for the project. We also discussed enhancing collaboration across disciplines and how this can improve the results. And also we noticed that in many projects, stakeholder engagement is very crucial for the development of indicators and for the indicators to go forward across the future years. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of outputs for this future outlook for this output, we suggest the integration of monitoring with digital technologies, including the use of AI. And basically, it allows us to improve adaptability and responsiveness, and also knowledge exchange across borders to basically allow for the replication of successful monitoring practices in different socioeconomic and climatic conditions, given that projects range across regions in Europe. If we move on to the next slide, please. Now, output 2, which is the more unofficial, let's say, output, is this roundtable summary document. We basically outline the participants' recognition of the shared value principles and reporting structures. And basically, as an added value to regional and local authorities, we have outlined the pluses, let's call them like this, of the approaches, shared challenges, and the feasibility of having a shared monitoring evaluation framework for all the projects. And this would allow for the possible unification of reporting of efforts across all these projects. Moving on, please. Thank you. And then we also identified future, let's say, focus points that we could explore further. And among the 3 main topics that we came across was monitoring evaluation learning in the context of different geographic scales, because this is something that affects projects in terms of adaptability as well. How to address MEL for long-term outcomes, both conceptually and practically, and also how to best capture the attribution of project impact, because this can be quite difficult also as the years go by to say whether an impact is really coming from the project or not. That is all from my side. I will leave you now with Tia to take you to the next steps and to carry on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Yeah, as with the thematic working group before and citizen and stakeholder one as well, these outputs are already on Futurium, and Martina will share the information soon so you can have a look at what the presenters have been talking about in more detail. So we'll just have a couple of minutes for Q&A, because I know that Federico Borra, the Climate Change Policy Officer for the European Commission, wants to come back and say a few things. We're all really impressed with all the outputs. So I'm going to go through the Slido and select a couple of questions. Some of them that you've added, like how to be involved in other events, etc., will be answered in the follow-up email that you will receive. So that will be answered then. I'm going to choose a question that has been directed to Tommaso and others. So maybe Tommaso, maybe other speakers can come in as well and respond. The question is, did you experience a hesitation from the stakeholders in collaborating in this work because they find the projects too science-based? Do we have, I don't know if Tommaso's still with us, or maybe
Sorry,
otherwise.
yeah. Yeah, sorry, I didn't understand if if that was framed for the overall Q&A. I'm not sure I fully understand the question, like if the projects that we took were too much science-based from mitigation and adaptation perspective. I don't know if
I think the question is about, is there a hesitation from stakeholders to collaborate in mitigation and adaptation projects because they find them too sciencey or too complicated? And how do you improve that stakeholder engagement at the beginning?
That's a good question, but that's not something that has come up to my knowledge. I think rather there were a lot of examples of very practice-oriented examples brought up by local governments and regional governments. So it was more about identifying which typology of interlinkages could be exploited. This didn't seem to come up as such a strong issue, but I can relate to the group. Thanks.
Great, and I'll take one more question, which is for Oscar. What is the difference, or why are you differentiating between citizens and stakeholders? This is a question that comes up a lot. Citizens can also be stakeholders. Could you elaborate a bit on this difference?
Yeah, so very basically, the main difference stems from their availability to provide inputs for the project, but also from the point of view of the stakeholders themselves. They are obviously citizens, but not all citizens are directly affected by the measures we implement or the absence of measures taken by this project. So it's very important that we address these already homogeneous groups that are present there that we call stakeholders or key stakeholders because they are key enablers for these projects. Whereas the citizens, they are obviously part of the families, so they have an economic affectation by the project, of course. They are part of the culture, so it's important that they accept the solutions. So they are part of the process, but they are not directly involved in a project from the scientific point of view. So you have to approach them separately. And also when it comes to creating the additional pathways or prioritizing certain solutions, it's very difficult to get to that level of knowledge and capacity that is needed. And this is also linked to the previous question. You cannot involve everyone. And there's going to be some groups that is not that they resist or hesitate, it's simply that they cannot provide you the answer you're looking for. So in order to create those conditions, you have to look for stakeholders in the first place, and then for a more public acceptance point of view, so all citizens involved.
Thanks, Oscar. Yeah, that was a really good response. Great. So I think we will close the Q&A for now. Other questions will be answered in the follow-up email. And if you have any questions, then get in touch with the contact that will be sent via the email. And I'll now pass back to Martina and Federico for some closing remarks. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Yara. And thank you, everyone, for the great presentations that we had today and the great questions that we have on the slide as well. The Q&A section will remain open, so please, if you have further questions, keep inputting them. We will collect all of them, send them to the speakers, and as Yara said, we'll be providing responses to each one of them in the summary report after the event that will be made available in the online site shortly. So as part of the closing remarks, I would now like to invite Federico Porra once again to give his closing statements. And while Federico, you come in, maybe Jenny, if we can move on to the next slide. I will ask our participants today to share your thoughts on the presented outputs and on the workshop itself. So we have an active survey poll on Slido now. If you click on the link and you scan the QR code and go to the poll section, you'll be able to see all of the questions. Please give us your constructive feedback. This will be very valuable, not only for us, for further events, organizations, but also for the thematic working groups on their work that they have been doing and that they will continue doing. So I will leave this slide here and invite Federico to take the floor.
Thank you, Martina. To close, I just wanted to thank again the projects for the rich presentation. As you can see, a lot has been done. It's very interesting now. I think from our perspective, the challenge now is to promote, is to disseminate, is to work on a, let's say, user-friendly way to disseminate what's been produced and what will be produced from now on. From the perspective of Secretariat, it's also really important to extract what's, we can call it decision relevant. So exploit really the work that has been done on the basis indeed of this presentation. Clearly the work done and presented today reflects the views and the ideas of the projects, but and not of the Commission, but on our side of the Secretariat. Clearly this is also an opportunity to hear interesting views indeed on different topics that are vital for the future of the mission. Irene Bonvissuto, who is the head of the Secretariat of Mission Adaptation, I think commented before that she found quite interesting one of the slides, the overview slides on the main messages that were presented, I think, by the thematic working group on citizen engagement. And I would go even one step more, if compared to what she said, actually saying that on our side, perhaps it will be actually interesting to see to what extent we might have a similar approach also to the other thematic working groups, perhaps having one slide or one summary on the main messages. And I think this would help us a lot to exploit those outputs, but also to disseminate it on the side of the Commission when it comes to perhaps the next events that we will have this year, even as part of Mission Adaptation. Some of the projects were mentioned in the work that already been doing to promote the thematic working groups output as part of the Mission Forum next week in Poland, but we'll also have a Mediterranean Forum in Bologna in June, and this will be another opportunity, why not, to have some short peels of main messages that we can also bring to the wider audience in person in Bologna. So I think as a follow-up, this could be done. It would be very useful on our side. Thanks again to you, Martina, and to the team of Me4Adapt for organizing the event, but also to help in animating these thematic working groups. Thanks to the projects for the great work. These are not gone unnoticed on the side of the Secretariat, and looking forward to disseminate it, but also to continue the work of the thematic working groups in the months ahead. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Federico, for those encouraging words in terms of closing remarks. And as we have one more minute, and well, I ask you to please continue sharing your feedback on the outputs and the event you heard today. Let's move on to the closing remarks themselves. So as a roundup of today, and Yara mentioned this previously a couple of times, the outputs from the thematic working groups will be made available on the resources and outputs section of Futurium of the EU Mission Adaptation online site. We will share the link in the chat shortly, along with some further information. And there you will already find, as Yara mentioned, some of the outputs, such as the Transformational Adaptation Policy Brief, the M&E report, and the Citizen and Stakeholder Engagement Briefing Note. We encourage you to stay tuned and to keep checking this tab regularly, as more outputs from the different thematic working groups will be made available shortly as they are completed. Further to that, we'd like to inform you, as we previously mentioned, that the recording, the presentation, and the summary report of today's event will be made available shortly as well on the online community site following the event. And this means that this can be used as a resource or a reference if you want to revisit any part of today's session. We're also excited to share some details on several upcoming events and monthly themes of events organized by Me4Adapt, which are open to all of the stakeholders in a broad sense. And again, more information we can share in the chat on where you can find the details on each of these. So in June, the monthly theme is land use and food systems. And this month we'll delve into sustainable land practices to promote resilience and sustainability in the food systems. And then for July, we will dive into critical infrastructure as the monthly theme. And we'll focus on resilience and adaptation of this critical infrastructure to different climate risks to ensure sustainability and functionality of essential systems in the face of the changing climate that we're facing today. Finally, as a reminder, if you haven't done so, make sure to register to Futurium, so to the EU Mission Adaptation online community site. It only takes 5 minutes. It's a very short form. We will drop the link in the chat as well, and we encourage you to sign up just to keep up with everything that's ongoing in terms of events, activities, resources, etc. So with that, I would like to thank everyone again and the thematic working groups for their hard work, the facilitators as well for their hard work as well in terms of coordinating and supporting these groups, the Secretariat, Federico, and I know that Irene is also here, for their encouragement and their interest, and also for being here today with us and providing these encouraging words and remarks.